this is an interview with Dr. Robin Hanson, a professor of economics at George Mason University and a futurist known for his unconventional takes on human behavior, technology, and society. He's the author of The Age of M and The Elephant of the Brain, both of which explore how hidden motives and future trends shape our world. You can read more about Dr. Hanson on our website, 6degrees.blog, and our Instagram page, 6 Degrees Away. Thank you and enjoy the interview.
So you grew up as the son of a Southern Baptist preacher. Could you
Yep.
describe how that upbringing and family environment shaped your worldview and guided your work today?
So I presume, the thing is, people only ever grow up in one place. So they don't know how it would have been different if they'd grown up elsewhere. Uh, Even if it does affect them, they just don't know. I mean, it was just my world, and I presume it affected me, but I'm just not sure how. Um, I guess, but I am in some ways Christian, even if I am no longer religious or something, just because that was the world I grew up in. Um, but Christianity has elements not just of so the idea of forgiveness and generosity, sacrifice, humility. Those are some of the values that Christianity celebrates. That even if people are no longer Christian, they tend to maintain those values. So I guess I probably retain many Christian values. Maybe a Christian idea of sort of heaven or of a future, heaven on earth, or those sorts of, that's part of my cultural upbringing. So I presume I bring some of those expectations with me.
So your educational journey took you through physics, philosophy, and a PhD in social science. Could you
Yep.
explain the single most important motive that drove your transitions across these fields, and show how that one motive continues to shape your approach to problems in economics and futurism?
Um, I guess I'm not held. So most wannabe academics, their biggest failing mode, aside from say not being smart enough, is just they can't focus. Most ordinary people just want to think about lots of different things and read about and learn lots of different things. And academia wants you to focus. So I was at risk of failing in the usual way because I didn't want to focus. I wanted to learn about lots of stuff. Luckily, eventually I managed to focus enough, just barely. But that would be the simplest diagnosis, is that I have the usual failing. I would learn about something and then things would run out there, and over there somewhere else would be this new topic that would seem to be lots I could learn about, and I would switch to learn lots about the new topic. And then it would run out. And I guess eventually I found that you could do enough things and call it social science or economics that I was less constrained by economics, as I might have been by, say, physics or chemistry or something.
Sure.
So
Oh, sure.
go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna ask the preceding question. I thought you were finished speaking. I can't see.
I mean, there's lots of things we could go off on that, but I guess I would like you guys, if you have further follow-up questions, like
Yeah,
to have more of a conversation. I don't want you, I'd rather not you just went through a list of predetermined questions and you more react to what I said and react back and forth and we have a conversation.
of course. Here, do you want to just go to the next question, then we can sort of move that way from here?
Okay, your choice.
So before academia, you spent about 9 years as a research programmer on AI and software at Lockheed Martin and NASA. How did those
Yes.
industry experiences shape your research agenda as a economist and futurist?
Um, I mean, just being in different parts of the world, you learn about that part of the world, and then, you use what you've learned there. I don't know if it shaped me more than that. Um, Certainly, as an economist, I understand more inside how government works, or at least some parts of government. Um, Certainly, as a scientist, I more understand about engineering because I spent time, in a sense, being an engineer, designing things. And so I appreciate more priorities and issues of engineering. Um, I learned that there's a standard stereotype of older students when they return to school is that they are less pliable. They were less willing to just become a copy of their professor, and they more come with their own ideas of what they want and what they're interested in. And that was true of me. So regardless of what I did during that time, just the fact there was that time would make me, as it does with anybody, less pliable. Now, older students are known for being more focused. They're less gonna, waste away their time and goof off and party and things like that. But they're also less pliable. So I was also less pliable.
And
I had more ideas of what I wanted to do.
what did your work look like at Lockheed and ESSA
I
in
was
terms of
a
the daily?
research programmer.
Mhm.
So that tends to be small research projects that you can do mostly yourself instead of having to coordinate with other people. Much of what makes software hard is that most software projects are large and you have to do a lot more interaction with other people and coordination. But I learned some of the issues of software complexity. So, software is mainly about complexity. That's what makes software hard, is managing a big complicated thing. And I came to understand that better than, say, most academics might, even though my software was still much smaller and less complicated and less interdependent than
Mhm.
most professional software is.
Yeah, and you also, yeah, you did quite a bit on AI, right? So like, I guess you kind
Nine
of,
years.
yeah, so I guess you got to see AI before it was in everyone's hands, right?
Well, AI has gone through many changes over a very long time. It started in the 50s. And so I saw the era of AI at that time from 84 to 93. But much, has changed in many ways and not changed in other ways. I certainly saw the hype for AI. That is, I was drawn into AI because I bought the hype that AI was about to change the world, and I wanted to be part of that. And I saw, how people justify that, how they think about it, how it plays out. And so I'm perhaps less willing to buy today's hype, more skeptical about hype of any technology, having seen how hype works.
Mhm. Has AI improved as much as it seems from the time that you were working on it to now, where nobody was talking, or relatively much fewer people were talking about it to now it's all anybody can talk about?
Well, over time, AI has gotten more popular and had more impact on the world and applied more places, but it's had these up and down cycles. So you're at the peak of an up cycle now.
Mhm.
But there were previous cycles where there was a peak. That's when I entered the AI field in 84, where there was a lot of hype about it then. And there have been other periods of hype for AI and automation. So, but over time, it is getting more powerful and having wider application. But that is a slow process of spreading technology and applying it in the world. And during a hype cycle, people are told it's going to be much faster than it is in terms of how fast it spreads and where it goes. So that's what you're being told now in this hype cycle is of a very rapid change soon, and it probably just won't be nearly as rapid as that in a shorter time.
And do you think that it just won't be as rapid, or do you think the changes won't be as sort of drastic as people are planning
Well,
for?
in the long run, changes will be huge, but it's about how long.
Mhm.
It's about, what will happen in the next 10 years or 20 years, right? In the next 200 years or 1,000 years, there'll definitely be huge impacts of AI. But if you're thinking on the next 3 years, then I'd say that's too fast.
Mhm. Even so, too fast for even sorts of, I mean,
The,
simple
the
jobs.
sort of forecasts that people are making about what will happen in 3 years are overblown.
Mhm.
It'll take longer than that to have a, you know, big penetration of the world.
I see. And so we wanted to speak a little bit about prediction markets, which you obviously have a large focus in as well.
I do. Sorry. Yes.
So was there a sort of specific moment or project that convinced you that prediction markets were going to be incredibly important in the future? And could you explain the benefits and the ideas behind prediction markets a bit?
There was a time before there was a World Wide Web, and there was a group of people that I was hanging with and working with that was imagining the World Wide Web before it existed.
Mhm.
And they were imagining it in part because they had ideals that they hoped could be achieved by it. They wanted to reform our sort of collective conversations, and they thought the web could help do that, in particular through backlinks.
Mhm.
And working with them, I came to doubt how much backlinks and the web could do
Mhm.
to improve conversation. And I was wondering what else could achieve these ideals instead. And these people I was hanging with were relatively libertarian.
Mhm.
I was not then that. I was young and naive, but they were libertarian. And so the idea of betting markets was more accessible to me. So I thought, well, could we achieve these ideals through betting markets instead of backlinks?
Mhm.
And I'm more of a theorist as a personal style, intellectual style. And so just conceiving the theory itself seemed compelling that, in fact, betting markets could do a lot to reform collective conversation.
And what
So
exactly?
that was the reason. It wasn't, obviously we have a lot of empirical data about speculative markets and how well they work, but just seeing the theory made sense.
And could you go a little bit into what backlinks are?
So on a web page, you might come to an underlined piece of text. That's a link. You click on it and it takes you to the other page.
Hmm.
A backlink is something that will let you go the other direction from a page or a link on a page to what links to it.
Uh-huh.
So the hope had been that if people said stupid things on pages out on the World Wide Web, that you could then look for rebuttals to that thing from the page. That was something that was absent in our usual world of media at the time. You could read a book, but you could not easily find the critics of the book or an article. And they were hoping that through ease of finding the critics, that would make things better.
Hmm. And what do you think prediction markets could be applied for specifically? Is that you think there's a incredibly general use, or what's the best use?
So, predictive markets are a way to aggregate information together into a consensus estimate.
Hmm.
They require effort. So they require that somebody pay to induce people to do that effort unless they are inclined to do it anyway. So then the question is, where do people need information or want information? And decision theory says the whole point of getting information is to make decisions. So then the obvious place that it's most valuable to collect information is right next to a decision.
Hmm.
So that was generated in me the idea of decision markets, markets to advise decisions. And that showed up relatively early for me in my thinking about it. And so that ever since then, that's been my focus is to try to find ways to get betting markets to advise decisions. But pretty much any decision can be advised if there are outcomes that you will see later that you were trying to achieve in your decision that you could later actually observe how much of those outcomes you got. So the potential of decision markets is any decision you make where you can tell what the options you were considering were and what happens after the fact in terms of what you were trying to get.
And I was also reading, and you also said a lot that not only can it help make decisions, but it can also predict what others will do better than you say maybe like surveys can, right? Like
A survey is another way to collect people together to aggregate information. So it's a mechanism. So it's a question of institution and mechanisms. The problem is there's a particular topic, like a decision you might make, and you want to have a better estimate about that decision. And then there's all these people who potentially could learn something about your decision and contribute it. And now the question is, how do you get them to learn something and then tell you in such a way that you get a lot of information without having to pay too much for it? That's the general problem of how to aggregate information. And a betting market, speculative market, is one mechanism for doing that. But it's a very powerful and probably the best general one we have.
and is like the LMSR, which I think you came up with,
Yes,
is that like an example of a prediction market or?
that's a mechanism for making trading easier. So
Okay.
a speculative market is a place where trades happen. And for a trade to happen, somebody needs to make an offer and somebody else needs to accept that offer. So in what's called a double auction, there's a book where you put down your offers, and then other people come down around and decide either they put down their offers or they look at the existing offers and accept one of them. But that, if there's a market that's thin, i.e., not very many traders that are not coming very often, you may have to wait a long time after you post an offer for someone to accept it. And then you're prices might be stale. You might no longer think those are the prices you want to accept. So instead of having a book where you put offers and wait for someone else to find them, a market maker is where somebody sits in the middle and then does most of the trades. That is, they stand ready to buy or sell. And it's not because they expect to hold things, except they expect to sell it. They'll buy something from you and sell it to somebody else, or vice versa. They're going to sit and be the middleman, but and make it easy for the rest of you to trade. Now, you can just show up and trade with the market maker and not worry about who's going to trade with the market maker later or who traded with them earlier. Now, market makers, it's in principle a very complicated task. You have to decide what offers to accept and to make based on, guessing which way the prices will go and how much trading there's going to be, et cetera. But what you'd like is a very simple automated market maker where it doesn't have to think very much. It just has offers. And there is a straightforward way to make a simple market maker. It's called a inventory based market maker. It just has so much in its inventory and it just makes trades at prices that are a function of its inventory. So the more it holds, the lower prices it gets, whereas when it gets less, the price goes up. And it just has a simple function like that. So has long been simple automated market makers, but I designed one that was more appropriate for a betting market where there's a bound of 0 and 1 for the probabilities, and a logarithmic version of the market maker does that well and has some nice properties, and that's called the logarithmic market scoring rule. It's a version of a market maker.
And does that market maker exist now, or is that just an theory?
Well, many people have been using that market maker for a long time now. Many websites have. And in fact, it was learning about that market maker that actually inspired most of crypto to make the market makers they have.
Mhm.
Most of crypto now uses AMMs, they call it, automated market makers. And they first learned about how to do an automated market maker from my discussion of how to do it for betting markets.
Mhm.
And you, I also read about this. Is it futarchy?
Futarchy, yes.
Yeah. And I've just been hearing you use the word bet a lot, and you always, I think futarchy means bet on beliefs and vote on values, right? Could
So first there's just betting, and then there is betting that informs decisions. And then the way to inform decisions is what I'll call decision conditional bets or estimates, prices. So if you're about to make a decision, you could do A or B, and you care about some C as the outcome, then what you want is to know C conditional on A or C conditional on B. That's advice for what to do. So there are ways to make betting or speculative markets give you those conditional estimates. And I call those decision markets because they are directly estimating the consequence of a decision. And then applying that to governance, I've called futarchy. So in order to show people just how much you could do with decision markets, I tried to show people that you could base a form of governance on it.
And what would policy around that look like?
What would policy what?
Around the sort of how would governments use this sort of
So
futarchy?
let's start with a smaller governance example. Consider a for-profit company,
Mhm.
and it has a CEO, and it has a stock price.
Mhm.
And the board of directors wonders whether they should keep the CEO or get a new one.
Mhm.
And what they want is to do that only if the stock price will be higher with the CEO than without.
Mhm.
So if the stock price is higher with the current CEO in place relative to a new CEO, they want to keep them. But if the stock price is higher with a new CEO in place relative to the current one, they want to get that new CEO.
Mhm.
So that's an example of a decision that is a governance decision. It's one of the most important decisions that for-profit companies make. And a decision market can just directly advise that decision by giving you decision conditional stock prices. That is, you can ask a company, traders in a company, to give you the stock price of the company if the CEO stays, and then the stock price of the company if the CEO leaves, and just compare those two numbers.
Mhm.
That's an example of using decision markets to advise the governance decision of keeping a CEO.
Mhm. I see. So just to move on to the great filter. So you use the great filter in the context of the Fermi paradox. Could you explain the idea briefly and your best account of where the filter sort of most likely sits?
So if you look up in the night sky, you see a vast universe that looks completely dead.
Mhm,
But we, sitting here on Earth, think we have a bright future, not only to do stuff here on Earth, but to spread out into the solar system and then into the universe, and over, say, the next million years, make a big impact on the universe near us. We could colonize the whole galaxy and then start to rearrange the galaxy. We could do that in a million years.
mhm,
Now, when we look out in the universe, we don't see anyone else who's done that,
mhm,
which is puzzling because we think we're not that special.
mhm,
We started out, our ancestors, maybe on Earth, simple dead matter that slowly evolved life and then more complicated forms of life, and then humanity, then civilization. So we think, why aren't there other things out there like that? It's a huge universe. There should be other places where something like what happened here happened there.
mhm,
Something rose to our level, but then in another million years afterwards, must be on, started to make a big splash in the universe around them.
mhm,
But we don't see anything like that out there. So that's Fermi's question, where is everybody? And I rephrased that into the question, what causes things to fail to go down this path?
mhm,
That is, you start out with simple dead matter, you start with simple life, you go on. Eventually, if you continue down this path, you reach to where we are, and then maybe in another million years, you're this big thing in the universe that makes a splash.
mhm,
Clearly, most things in the universe never get down this path. So something must prevent them from going down this path. That's the great filter, the sum total of all the little obstacles that prevent every part of the universe from becoming a big expanding civilization.
mhm,
So the great filter is just the renaming of that. But by renaming it, it lets you think about it differently. It lets you ask, where along this path is the filter? How big is the filter?
mhm,
And how much of the filter is still ahead of us as opposed to behind us? If any substantial part of the filter is still ahead of us, then we have poor odds of making it to the big expanding scenario. Uh, and we're curious about what made the difference to being us.
mhm. So I also heard you use the terminology grabby aliens versus sort of more shy aliens, if you will. Could you explain that briefly?
So, in this last scenario I described, right now we are quiet. That is, you could look at us from a long way away and not see very much
Mhm,
because we're not very big and we're not doing very much. But if we continue to expand as we think we probably could, then we will get bigger and more noticeable, becoming what I'd call loud aliens.
mhm,
The way we would be loud is by being grabby. That is, we would spread out from here and grab stuff and change it. And that's what people from a long way away would see. They would see all this stuff we touched and changed.
mhm,
So, grabby aliens is just a generic descriptor for aliens who don't stay quiet and stay in one place. They go out and they make an impact that would be visible from a long way away. And the question is, what's the chance we will become grabby? But then, where are the other grabby civilizations in the universe? So, I and some co authors made a three parameter model of where such aliens are in the universe with each parameter fit to data so that we have a rough model of where are the aliens in space-time.
mhm. So this theory obviously comes with the assumption that aliens do indeed exist. So what do you say to people who don't necessarily believe in aliens and think this is all?
Well, this model has parameters such that you could turn the dial down and then they would be almost none. Now, the model is for us and other things. We exist. So clearly there are advanced life appears at some rate.
Mhm,
It's just a matter of how low the rate is. The rate could be so low that we're the only advanced life in the entire observable universe, but the universe goes along much farther out past what we can see. So there'd still be other things way out there. They just wouldn't be anything that we could see around here or get to.
Mhm.
but there are some somewhere if the universe keeps going on forever. It's just a matter of how often.
I see.
So, you know, basically, how often advanced life appears is one of the key parameters in the Krabby Aliens model.
Mhm. So in your book, the Elephant in the Brain with Kevin Simler, you talked about hidden motives very much. What is an example of a very prevalent hidden motive that people aren't necessarily very aware of?
Well, the most surprising one we describe in our book is that people think they go to the doctor to get well,
Mhm.
but apparently not. That is, people on average are not actually getting more well when they go to the doctor,
Mhm.
at least on the margin. Nevertheless, they are still quite eager to do so. So the question is why?
Mhm.
Our overall book is structured in that the first third of it is trying to convince you that it might make sense that we had hidden motives. And then the last two thirds are going through 10 areas of life, trying to convince you in each one what that hidden motive is in that area. So in each area, we tell you about some puzzles that don't make sense according to the usual story of what our motives are there. And
Mhm.
then we often offer an alternative motive theory and say why that makes more sense of these puzzles as a way to argue that we, in fact, have this other motive as our usual motive. The first chapter is about just say body language. Most people aren't aware of many things they're doing with body language,
Mhm.
and they will often even deny what they're doing with body language, but in fact, they are expressing many things with body language and not aware of the motives they have in communicating with their body.
So after you've researched so much about hidden motives, I'd assume you have a sort of cynical view on things. How does that affect the way you navigate your day to day, or does it at all?
My main intellectual approach is to assume that I'm not that different from everybody else.
Mhm.
So I don't actually have to look inside myself. I can look at the average of other people and figure out what they're roughly like, and I'll just presume that I'm like that.
Mhm.
Even if it's not pretty or what I'd like to think about myself, I will presume I'm not that special.
Mhm.
So that means there's not so much conflict. I mean, I'm just, if I were looking at my particulars and trying to decide how much I am living up to my ideals or being like what I think, I would then face a lot more conflicts between the ideals I would like to project and the, more negative theories that I might have to consider.
Mhm.
And then I might not be up to the task of being very honest about that. It's hard to be honest about yourself, but
Mhm.
it's easier to just look at the world and try to be honest about it, and then just assume you're like them.
I see. That's very interesting. Your work generally. So we've interviewed many professors from different schools and whatnot. And when you look up Robin Hanson on Google, it shows American economist. But your work is so much more spread out and so much more over such a variety of very interesting, unique things. So what makes you go from prediction markets to the great filter and aliens to human nature?
So we started out by saying that I just didn't want to focus. But in order to find a place in the world, I needed to find ways to contribute so that the world could value what I was doing.
Mhm.
So I have somewhat acquired a polymath strategy, a
Mhm.
sort of role as a polymath. And my most fundamental strategy is to look for important neglected things where I can find an angle. So
Mhm.
um, I don't think it's actually that hard to tell what's important. But if you look at what seems important and then you look what academics study, they are actually clump. There's big areas of apparently important things that academics aren't paying much attention to.
Mhm.
So those are good candidates if you want to look for important neglected things. If you can make progress there, you can probably make more progress than elsewhere. If there's already 1,000 people looking at a subject and you're a number 1,001, you just can't be expect to make as many helpful contributions as if there's only one or other two other people who have been in your area. then you just much more plausibly can find very basic insights and contributions that other people haven't. Of course, the problem is that academics mostly want to reward the other people who are clumped near them, and it's harder for them to appreciate work that's done away from their clumps. But still, you can just make more fundamental progress if you look for important neglected things.
Mhm.
Now, of course, many things are neglected because they're just hard.
Mhm.
So the question is whether an important neglected thing is neglected because it's hard or because it's just away from the clumps.
Mhm.
And the way to make the distinction there is, can you find an angle? So an angle is some sort of way to make progress on the topic.
Mhm.
And often you just can't think of an angle. You just don't know what you could do to make progress on the question, and then you just have to let it slide. But if you search in important neglected topics, you can often find ones that you have an angle, you have a way to think about it, an approach, and then you can dive into work on that. And this is where being a polymath helps. The more different areas that you've studied so far, the more different tools you've learned, and the more different puzzles you've noticed, each of those gives you a potential angle on each new topic.
Mhm.
Uh, that is, every other area that you've studied is something that could be similar, that you might want to treat similarly to each new thing you see. And each new tool you've learned is a tool you could try to apply to the new topic. So the more different areas you've learned, the more promising it is to go searching in the space of important neglected topics for something where you had an angle. So I'd say fundamentally, I keep changing topics because when I work on a topic for a while, I make some progress, but then maybe I run out, find it hard to find a new angle, and I find angles elsewhere.
So why do you think academics are so clumped up in disregarding things that are important and things that should be researched but aren't? And do you think there's anything that journals or universities could do to incentivize academics to research more unique things?
They could, but they won't.
Mhm.
That is, most areas of life have some sort of internal logic of how they function and how they gain resources from the rest of society to keep going. And then they also have some sort of slogan or ideal that they give lip service to, which is what they try to use to justify themselves. And those two things are just different. So, what academics actually do in the world primarily is to credential themselves and other associates as impressive.
Mhm.
Students go to school with academics, and the academics credential the students as impressive. Journalists call up academics for quotes about articles because the academics are impressive. Funders want to hand money to impressive academics so they can gain status and association with them.
Mhm.
Academics do a great job at creating and maintaining credentialed impressiveness. That's their social function, and they achieve it quite well. But they claim their rationale is intellectual progress and insight, but they're not actually working to maximally achieve that.
Mhm.
That's just the excuse they give if you ask why should you exist? So just in general, many parts of society, there's a difference between the reason something exists and the reasons people give about why it's good.
Mhm.
And that's true for academia as well as dancing or all sorts of other things.
Mhm.
People are not that willing to be honest about the actual function of many parts of our world. That's hidden motives. So academia has a hidden motive, if you will. Hidden motive is to credential people as impressive, and the claimed motive is to make intellectual progress or an insight. And again, there's just people give lip service to one thing and really do another.
So where does the hidden motive to credential people as important and respectable come from? Why wouldn't they just be looking for to get the best research and do the most productive things?
Because individual people actually want to associate with impressive people.
Mhm.
Status is an important driver of activity and associations in our world. So individuals want to be seen as high status. They want someone to credential them as high status,
Mhm.
and they want to associate with people who are high status. That's a very basic human motive, and
Mhm.
academia is serving that motive in a direct way. This thing about insight and progress and is just a thing we say, but if you think about it, we don't actually have much reason to want it personally. We might think it would be good for society or something, but we personally don't get much out of that.
Mhm. So you're at George Mason University, I understand, as well as Oxford's research lab at Oxford. So do you think George Mason University has those same pitfalls as these institutions, and how come you chose that? I mean, you're very famous. You do lots of research. I'm sure you could have a pick at many universities. How come you chose George Mason as opposed to another institution?
So, first of all, the Future of Humanity Institute at Oxford doesn't exist anymore. It ended last year, so
Uh-huh.
I can't have an affiliation with something that doesn't exist anymore.
I see.
But I was affiliated until they no longer exist. Secondly, like most academics, I barely squeezed by to get tenure somewhere.
Hmm.
So most academics never get offered a tenure track job at all, and then some of them don't get tenure, and getting tenure anywhere is a huge, great deal.
Hmm.
Once you get tenure anywhere, you can spend the rest of your life mostly studying whatever you think is most interesting,
Hmm.
which is a remarkable degree of freedom uh, that than most people ever get.
Hmm.
I'm lucky to have that, but I'm not in substantial demand elsewhere. Otherwise, there'd be job offers from elsewhere, but there aren't. So I'm feeling just quite lucky to have any place in the world where I can have the time and freedom to study what I think is important.
Hmm. And what was your work at Oxford, and why was it disbanded?
Um, Oxford was a research institute there, and initially, when they first got it started, the people there were trying to show that their work was valuable. And one way to do that was to have affiliates who were doing things. So they were happy to list me as an affiliate and then list all the things I was doing as crediting them as being a good research institute. But I never got paid for that affiliation. But many people were impressed by having an Oxford affiliation. So that benefited me, and then it benefited them to take credit for what I was doing. Eventually, they went away because there were others at the university who didn't like the research institute. There are conflicts among academics for what people think is appropriate research and what styles and topics are appropriate, and there were conflicts there.
You're talking about conflicts. What was the incel controversy in 2018? I
Um,
saw
in
that.
2018, there was a news articles about people who were called incels or called themselves incels who were unhappy about having low amounts of sex and therefore complaining that the world had sex inequality, i.e., they were on the low end of the inequality. And some of those complained by driving a vehicle into a crowd and killing people. And so the topic of sexual inequality was in the news. I had long known that the world has had many people who similarly complain about income inequality. As you may know, uh, income inequality is a great topic of concern. And many people have not only complained about it, they have complained unhappily that they suffer low income, i.e., they are poor, and that the world of inequality, world by allowing and tolerating income inequality allows them to be poor. And they have complained about that through killing people. There have been people who have tried to call attention to the problem of income inequality by killing people in order to dramatize how concerned they and other people are about the problem.
Mhm.
What I did is I wrote a brief blog post where I said, isn't it interesting? There are these two different groups concerned about two different kinds of inequality, both of them sometimes willing to kill people to call attention to their cause.
Mhm.
And yet, these two groups don't overlap much and they don't like each other.
Hmm.
I thought that was interesting. And so I made a blog post saying just what I've said to you now. And other people said that I was therefore supporting rape and slavery by saying this.
Mhm.
Because the claim was that if I was going to consider that people who complain about sexual inequality deserve some consideration from their view, the only possible way to solve sexual inequality was rape and slavery, and therefore I must be advocating for that. I don't find that very believable conclusion, but that's in fact what people said. And then many people were very unhappy with me for hearing other people say that I was advocating rape and slavery. And therefore, there were actually cancel consequences of that. Organizations didn't want to associate with me. I was uninvited to conferences on the basis of the claim that I was advocating rape and slavery by pointing out the similarity of some sort between those who advocate for concern about income inequality and those who have similar concerns about sexual inequality.
Hmm. So people talk a lot about free speech and cancellations and whatnot. That was a huge part of Trump's running and in Biden
Yes.
administration. And that's very much talked about. Going through that, what do you think? How do you view these cancellations and free speech and whatnot, and Twitter and things like that?
Um, I mean, the the danger, I think, is when people try to coordinate to basically get people fired, get people uninvited to conferences, things like that.
Mhm.
I think there's much less danger if somebody, hears about you, doesn't like you, and then doesn't want to personally associate you, doesn't want to read you, doesn't want to go to your talk, doesn't want to be a student or whatever. But the consequences definitely get ramped up when people try to coordinate to get somebody fired or get somebody deplatformed or so whatever.
Mhm.
The fundamental problem, I think, is that humanity is not very inclined to look into much detail to rumors that pass through gossip networks.
Mhm.
This is the main reason we invented law. So long ago, people lived in small forager groups of, say, 20 to 50 people. And in those groups, they knew each other very well. And so if there was an accusation against any one of them, they knew a lot of context, what to take that into account. They knew that person's life and their style. They could interpret such accusations pretty well because they knew everybody very well. But then with the rise of farming, um, we were in larger communities, let's say roughly 1,000 people instead of 30. And now we knew each person less. And so often a rumor would pass around about one person that other people would say. And then as the rumor would pass, you might tell me a rumor about somebody neither of us knows very well. And then I wouldn't think very carefully about whether you're right. I'm more interested in pleasing you. You are somebody I know. You're telling me about a rumor, and I want to agree with you without looking into much detail about whether it's right or wrong. So, rumor mills have a rush to judgment. That's just the nature of rumor mills. So, on larger scales, that means if there's a rumor mill that passes that accuses somebody of something, it's just going to either grow or not, but not really based that much on whether it's right. Because the point of law, the whole idea of law, the essence of law is we pick one person, the judge, and we say, you are to decide, but don't decide until you've heard all the evidence. That's it. And that solves the rumor mill problem. Now they will listen to all the evidence and then decide. But in a rumor mill, in a set of accusations that passes from mouth to mouth, that doesn't happen. Nobody sits down and waits for all the evidence before they decide. They pass something on as that somebody passes to them, and they're mainly interested in pleasing the people they talk to immediately. The person who says something to them, the person they say something to them, to the other person. That's just a problem with gossip and rumors. So that's why it's preferable to use law over gossip to solve social problems of people doing bad things. And so I might say, look, if there's kinds of things you think are bad enough that you're worth canceling them for, then we should just have a law against those things and then have a trial and have law settle that.
Mhm.
That would be my recommendation. And then I would be happy to be accused in court of something and defend myself. And I think in these cases, I would have defended myself quite ably. I don't think a court would have convicted me of this, but rumor mills can because they do not look very carefully at the evidence.
Mhm. So I didn't quite understand how they spun up your words to say that you were endorsing rape and sexual inequality and things like that. Could you go more into that? There.
So I compared income inequality and sexual inequality.
Mhm.
Aren't these similar? People took that as meaning I was pro solving sexual inequality.
I see. Okay. Yeah.
And then they think that's the only way to solve it is rape and slavery. Therefore, I must have been pro rape and slavery because I was not denouncing the people who were complaining about sexual inequality. Therefore, I must be supporting them. Therefore, I must support rape and slavery. That's it.
I see. Um, so
You see, I think I could have easily won that in a court,
Mhm.
but there wasn't a court.
Mhm. So in your book, in the elephant in the brain with or no, we already spoke about that. Except, could you talk about your debate with Eliezer Yudkowsky, and how you spoke about forecasts within AI and how your position has changed since the debate?
So, for context, I had a blog, still have a blog called Overcoming Bias. For a while, it was a group blog. I started it as a group blog relatively soon after I started as a blog in 2006.
Hmm.
Eliezer Yudkowsky, I think, was the other person who joined the group blog who posted the most on the blog besides me. And he, early on, his concern was about AI risk, he'll call it.
Hmm.
Um, and he was concerned that AIs would be out of control and destroy humans. Um, that was in, again, 2007 and afterwards. He and I debated this and discussed this on our shared blog at the time. And then, as you know, in the intervening, I guess, 17 years,
Hmm.
18 years, world of AI has blown up into being a bigger thing. We are now in a boom of AI. And he has convinced many people to share his concerns about AI risk. And now he is, widely quoted and widely cited as somebody talking about this risk, and many prominent people in AI share his concerns. Um, so uh, some reporters have noticed that we had this debate early on and asked us to revive the debate today, but he has declined, so we have not had that conversation. Um, we could go into, what his arguments for and mine are against, if you like. I don't know where you want to go with conversation here.
Yeah, so why what yeah, exactly. What are his arguments for and what are your arguments against?
His arguments, have been numerous arguments, and then at times he said, "I don't understand his arguments." So of course, that's been a complication. But he recently released a book of his arguments, so I then had a blog post where I, responded to his book, so I could more directly say, "I know what he's saying now."
Hmm.
So there was when we had our debate way back when, and then there's what he's saying now. I actually don't think he's changed his mind that much, but he's changed his framing somewhat. Um, Certainly, now the claim is basically that AI will robustly change its values in ways that you can't predict.
Hmm.
And then it will be robustly more powerful than the rest of us as humans. And then it will generically want to kill us to achieve its values.
Hmm.
Um, that's the core of the argument, still in his book that came out in the last couple of months. Again, AI will generically change its values over time in
Hmm.
ways that we can't predict ahead of time and that we can't prevent, I guess, from changing. Generic values, i.e., random values, are values that have the AI want to kill us, and so they do. They are just more powerful then. Um, Now, at the time, I was just relatively skeptical of that. So, first of all, long ago, he was more focused on a relatively sudden change. He called it FOOM, wherein the AI would, in a basement over the weekend, suddenly go from being small and powerless to vastly powerful and able to kill everybody.
Hmm.
And in that weekend, it would suddenly change its values in a vast, dramatic way. Um, I found that rapid change to be unlikely. I thought, it would change more slowly and people would notice and be able to monitor. But there is this long-term question of, you know, in the long run, still the AIs collectively could be more powerful than us and have values different from us.
Hmm.
And then in the long run, that might generically mean they kill everybody. Um, my main argument has generally been to say that you were expecting this of your non-AI descendants too.
Hmm.
Set aside AI, ask what were you thinking was going to happen with your descendants?
Mhm.
You were thinking that your descendants would, in fact, become more powerful than you, that ancestors in the long run become weak compared to descendants.
Mhm.
You expect that your descendants' values will change in ways you can't constrain and can't even predict.
Mhm.
And you therefore expect that they will have conflicts with you and win conflicts with you. That's just what you expect in general from your descendants.
Mhm.
Now we look at AI, and that's just the claim that they're making about AI. It's not different. It's just to expect the same thing from your AI descendants you expect from your other descendants. So it seems to be if you're going to be extra worried about the AI, you need some reason why to be extra worried about them compared to your other descendants. Now,
Mhm.
for some people, it's just, oh, well, the AI is metal, and therefore we just don't like them as much, and we are, we don't like them winning and having control because we don't respect them or value them because they're made out of metal.
Mhm.
That could be one reason. Some people say more specifically they think AIs couldn't be conscious, and therefore you don't want AIs to win because then unconsciousness would be winning.
Mhm.
And other people might say, well, the changes are going to be faster with AI, so this was okay if it was slow, but not if it's faster.
Mhm.
But there was going to be pretty fast change for your descendants, even if there wasn't going to be AI. The world's changing pretty fast, actually, and getting faster.
So do you think that AI will have a lot of safety problems in the future, and how do you think AI will, or safety within the context of not killing everybody and but addressable things, and then also um, how do you see AI shaping the future in terms of employment and the economy and things like that?
So, for the near future, AI is going to be sold and delivered by large for profit companies, and they will make sure they aren't too damaging. Otherwise, their customers wouldn't want to buy them.
Mhm.
So, I think whatever damaging events happen will either be slow and rare or the sort that people can't see because otherwise they wouldn't want the product.
Mhm.
Um, in the intermediate term, eventually AIs will get cheap enough to displace human labor. And that's partly what I talk about in Age of M as another scenario by which AI would replace human labor. And then humans need to find out what to do in that situation. So I think we should basically buy robots took your job insurance. We should set that up and sell it, and people should have it so that when it happens, they are insured. That's the most straightforward solution. And in a growing AI economy, it might double every month. So your wealth would double every month. So if you have some sort of nest egg of assets, then after a few months, it gets very large. And then you'll be rich. You just need to make sure you have enough of that to start so that it can grow to be large. So and eventually, yes, artificial minds and bodies will displace bio-squishy ones because they're cheaper and more cost effective. And that's just what you should expect in the long run. And you should be ready for that to happen as insurance. So, look, already today you get retirement insurance basically. You expect eventually you have to retire and you save up money to prepare for it. Those who can't compete in the new economy will need to prepare to retire.
Mhm.
And there are straightforward ways to do that. So let's just do it.
But insurance sort of comes with the implication that some people will need it and some people won't. But in a world where everybody's going to be unemployed, how would an insurance work?
So when some people have a risk and other people don't, insurance companies have to do what's called underwriting to determine who has how high a risk.
Mhm.
But if there's a risk everyone shares, underwriting is no longer necessary. And in fact, the insurance is cheaper to provide in terms of underwriting.
Mhm.
The problem is there's what's called correlated risk. And so some people need to take on that correlated risk. So the supplier of the insurance have to suffer correlated risk.
Mhm.
But we have financial assets to do this. Look, mostly when you work for a company, the company insures you against your productivity variations by giving you a wage. Wages are insurance against productivity variations, but it's a very common practice in our world to pay you wages so that you are insured against the fluctuations in your productivity. We have many other financial assets that are in fact insurance. We have, say, catastrophe futures, which are, say, weather insurance. but they're correlated. A whole bunch of people in an area can all buy catastrophe futures, and then they all get paid in the catastrophe. Then they don't need underwriting because they all show the same risk. So here, just because there's correlated risk doesn't mean there can't be insurance. It means the underwriting costs are lower, but the higher risk correlation means that it's more costly for the people to provide it. But still, if there are some people better able to handle the risk than others, then it makes sense for them to transfer the risk through insurance. So some people out there are not at so much at risk of losing their jobs. So for them, the risk that robots will take many people's jobs doesn't hurt them so much. So they are better able to handle the risk of other people losing their jobs so they can be the suppliers of the insurance. Basically, you have a financial ass on one side, somebody buy it, on the other side, people sell it. One side is buying the insurance, the other is selling the insurance.
I see. So sort of elaborating on this point, in the Age of M, your book, you explored a future dominated by brain emulated minds. Could you go into what brain emulated minds are and how that society would differ from ours?
So this is my book, The Age of M, and it's an attempt to analyze a particular future scenario. And in that scenario, a particular kind of AI gets cheap and basically dominates the world.
Mhm.
So, Work, Love, and Life When Robots Rule the Earth is the subtitle. So, I was interested in the scenario, what happens when AI becomes common? And I wanted to analyze that scenario in detail, and I wanted to show people it was possible to do so. So many futurists have said that if you have a technological change that big, it's just impossible to say what would happen.
Mhm.
And I wanted to show, no, you could say what would happen. You just had to work through it slowly and methodically. So that's what I tried to do in this book. So brain emulation is where you take a particular human brain and you scan in fine detail where its cells are and cell connections are and the types of each cell, and then you make a computer model of the whole brain. So that emulation is very much like the original human. It acts like the original would in the same situation. It just acts differently because it's in new different situations. That's a much easier kind of AI to analyze. In general, in AI, there are all these possible minds, and it depends which kinds of AIs we have, how the world goes. But these kinds of AIs are very familiar. Their minds are just like ours, so it's much easier to think through how their world changes. And that's what I try to do in this book, to try to work out in great detail how does the world change if this kind of AI becomes cheap and cheaper than humans.
So I went out to UT Austin about a month ago to speak to Professor Scott Aronson, who's talked about this exact
Yes,
brain emulation. I'm not sure if
yes,
you're familiar with him.
I know him. Yes,
Do you so he speaks of it and he says, if this can exist, what are those implications on free will? What are your views on that? What do you think if something can if there can be a computer that can accurately predict all of your decisions, um, does a human being still have free will in the, I don't know, traditional sense?
I just don't find the free will question very interesting or even clear. So I don't care much about free will. But more generally, the idea of brain emulations has long inspired many philosophical debates.
Mhm.
And my point was that people had neglected the question of what would actually happen. How would the world change? So when the idea of brain emulations have come up, first of all, people have asked, is that me or is that someone else?
Mhm.
Is that conscious or is that unconscious? Does it have free will? These are all questions that engage many people about the concept of brain emulation, but I found them not the most interesting question, that the most interesting question had been neglected, and that's why I wrote this book. I say the most interesting question about brain emulations is what would actually happen if we had them?
Mhm.
How does the world change? And I don't think how the world changed depends much on those philosophical questions.
So and sorry, could you go more clearly into how you think the world would change specifically?
Sure. So one of the most dramatic changes is the growth rate of the economy, say, doubles every month, as I mentioned before. That's more generically for an AI dominated economy. That would be true for these kind of AIs too. Secondly, they will cram all together into a small number of very dense cities. Instead of being spread around the earth, they will be much more a small number of dense cities.
Mhm.
Third, their wages will fall to subsistence level, which has been the usual case for most animals and humans in history. It just hasn't been true in the last few centuries, but it comes true again. So these emulations are working hard, or working most of the time, but their jobs are not menial or backbreaking or boring. They are more modern jobs, but they are still working the most of the time. They'll spend most of their time in virtual reality. That is, most of their hours of experience are in a room like the one you're in, where it feels like the room you're in and it looks like the room you're in, except it's virtual reality.
Mhm.
Now that lets them change the room and make it more elegant and beautiful and engaging as they wish, but still, that's where most of their lives are spent. Um, their politics is a little different in that they have this new unit of coordination called the clan, all copies of the same original human, and they can use that unit for finance and governance and law. Um, these are some of the major changes, but the whole point was I wanted to show how many changes I could work out. And so the book is, in fact, somewhat tedious and dense through my effort to just show how many things I could say. And so my main challenge was to show you the world that I could say lots of things about this world. So it's
Mhm.
a dense book, hundreds of pages of all the things I could tell you about this world.
So how did you come up with these ideas? Was it reading other people's works? Was it empirical um, sort of work? How did
Well, I
you?
think I said before, I find an angle. So the angle here was just sit down and apply our standard academic theories to this scenario.
Mhm.
And it seemed to me I could, and I did. You apply labor economics, and you apply electrical engineering and computer engineering, and you apply urban economics, and you apply, you know, our theories of romance. You just apply all our standard theories to the scenario and slowly work out their consequences. That's my angle and method, and that's how I can make progress. I claim this is important and neglected in the sense that this may well happen, and people hadn't actually analyzed the consequence.
I see. So I wanted to talk a little bit about brain cryonics as well. How do you think the chances of success look, the long-term value of revival, and if it's a great way to use your resources, um, looking at cryonics as opposed to other ways of improving the future?
Well, you may not want to die as a person, regardless of the future. You just might not want to die. Now, medical science has been able to revive people who would otherwise die as medical science get better, but
Mhm.
you will die at a moment when medical science only knows so much, and in the future it can know more. So, quite plausibly, if you could somehow freeze yourself and stop yourself from changing, then later on, as medical science gets better, we could just bring you back. And in particular, we might bring you back as a brain emulation. That is, once we have the technology of doing brain emulations, we could take a frozen person's brain and scan it and then make a brain emulation out of them. And then it wouldn't matter what other medical problems they had, because now they would live along as a brain emulation.
Mhm.
So that is more my hope for cryonics. Cryonics is just a way in which I would get frozen when current medicine gives up on me. Instead of letting the worms eat me or burning me, you freeze me, stop stuff changing, and less sit there waiting for a brain emulation technology to scan my brain and make me a brain emulation.
Mhm. So, do you think a brain emulation would be like, for example, let's say I get frozen, I'm revived as a brain emulation. Do you think that would be the same consciousness? I mean, obviously, there's no clear answer to this, except do you think that would be me as that brain emulation, or would that be sort of a different consciousness that has the same?
So
Um,
there's two questions. Would it be conscious at all?
Mhm.
And then is it you? So I don't think we have any concrete evidence at all, actually, on anything being conscious, honestly. In
Mhm.
fact, you don't even know that you're conscious. You just have a strong inclination to believe so and say so, but you don't actually know.
Mhm.
So nobody actually has any data or will ever have any data than they have now about which things in the universe are conscious.
Mhm.
And so that's just going to be, it's going to be this point of dispute and argument for a long time to come because we'll never actually know any more than we do now. So I find it hard to believe that it could only be squishy, bio-squishy things with this sort of material that could be conscious. That seems kind of strange. I would think the universe would be such that many kinds of things could be conscious, but we don't really know. Um, and so again, that's one of those questions that people just went over and over with before. And I thought that's getting boring. Let's talk about what actually happens.
Mhm.
And so my book is about what actually happens. Now, is it you is a different question because that's in a sense about what you identify with. So, like, I'm 65 years old now, 66 actually,
Mhm.
and I was different when I was young. I had different personality and different energy and different priorities.
Mhm.
Was I the same person? I don't think there's an objective answer to that. I think that's a question about what I want to embrace as me and what my older self wanted to embrace as me. You can see a wider range of things as you or a smaller range of things as you. That's a choice you have. I don't know that there is a correct answer of what is you.
Mhm.
You know, if you think about it, every day you wake up and you're a little different. Is that you or is that not you? I mean, I don't think there is an answer. So if you don't think the emulation is you, then you'll be less willing to become an emulation. The ones who do will be the ones who are willing to think it's them. So those are the kinds of predictions I can make. So and that's what I do in the book. I can predict what the actual answers people accept to these questions are, even if I don't know the true answers. I can say the emulations will think they have free will, just like you do. I can say they will think they were the same person as the human they started with. And
Mhm.
when they make copies, they will think they are the same person as that. I can predict that's how they'll think. I can also even predict that when they make a short term copy to do a job and then end, they will be okay with that.
Mhm.
Those are the kinds of predictions I make in the book. So I predict what their answers to these questions will be, not the actual answers.
Mhm. So do you think a brain emulation could exist in one area and then be re-emulated into, I don't know, a different planet or something like that? Would that be something that could happen in this sort
Well,
of?
basically, a brain emulation can be represented as a computer file.
Mhm.
So you can just transmit that computer file somewhere else, even say around to the other side of the earth, and then you can download it into a new body and then it starts up there. So, yes, you could do that across the universe. You could do it across town. You can even put it in an archive file and then wake it up a century later.
Mhm.
It's still the same person.
I see. And how do you look at these things in relation? Obviously, we spoke a little bit about your father, who's a preacher. Um, but how do you look at these things in relation to religion and
So,
things?
again, I'm less interested in knowing what the right answer is and knowing what their answer will be.
Mhm.
So, religion has actually been remarkably robust.
Mhm.
It's survived enormous social changes over the last few thousand years. The world has changed greatly, and religion has adapted and still continues. So, that makes me think that religion will continue into this new world too. The emulations will be religious, at least many of them. They will have rearranged or rethought through the religion's claims as applying to them and making sense to them. That because that's what we've done. Our world is really radically different than the world of thousands of years ago, yet we still use the same religions now.
Mhm.
So they will probably continue to use probably even the same religions.
Mhm.
Buddhism, Islam, Christianity, those will all actually continue to be the religions of the M's.
Mhm. That's interesting. So also the term futurist is thrown around often, and you're identified as a futurist. So what would you say being a futurist is?
Well, I mean, generally, I would like it to mean that it's somebody who focuses on the future and then tries to think carefully about it. Now, some people are just future activists, basically. They don't really care that much of figuring out what the future will be. They just more want to push for versions and visions of the future and maybe policies they think are future oriented in their vision of the future. That's a different kind of futurist. Some kind of futurists are just trying to inspire people. You can go to a talk and hear futurists inspire you about the future, and they might not know much about the future, but still they will engage you with their visions of it.
Mhm.
There's no, of course, official credential for it. I am interested in the future more, what it will actually be, more than I am in advocating for a particular version of the future.
Mhm.
But I have opinions about what I like or don't like, but that's less important to my analysis.
Mhm. And what would you like to see in the future? Do you like when you look forward, would you like the image of a brain emulated world where people are transmitted as folder files?
I like our civilization becoming grabby. I like a big, powerful future for us. I want to see us become great and do great things. And that requires that we continue to grow and it requires that we let ourselves change.
Mhm.
We let our future generations become more powerful than us and decide what they value and win conflicts with us and become great. So, brain emulations is one way that our descendants could be great. I think it'll happen eventually. The question is just when. But more generally, I do see scenarios where we could limit our future. We could decide, for example, we don't want to let any colonists leave the solar system ever.
Mhm.
And we want to keep everyone here because we all want to be one big happy family who can all consult each other and limit each other so that we all stay similar and together. That I can see how many people might want that to happen, but I would rather we become great.
Mhm. So, and lastly, we ask all of our interviews the same question, and that's how do you define success, both personally and professionally?
Um, my, I mean, obviously, I'm just a human who likes many of the usual things everybody else likes. I like sleep, I like entertainment, I like food, but I more have the specific goal of wanting to gain insight. I want to just figure things out that I can share with other people so that collectively all of what we know gets bigger. So I'm looking, as I said, for these opportunities to figure out things that are important and neglected where I can find an angle. And when I make a contribution, now everything we know can build on that. We can all learn more because that becomes one more thing we can use to figure other things out. So
Mhm.
I'm very engaged and I'm proud and find glorious the idea that humanity and our AI descendants or M descendants are learning a lot, figuring out a lot, including about what we value and what we think is virtuous and worthy. Those are also things we're figuring out, and that's all good to figure out. Eventually, we will run out of things to figure out. I expect maybe within a million years, maybe much sooner. We will just know everything there is worth knowing for the most part, and we'll have to find some other reason to live.
Mhm.
But until then, some of us can want to learn more, and that can be the reason we want to live.
Mhm. So I was reflecting a little bit on the reasoning for the club, which you were questioning about at the start. And I think it's very touching when somebody like yourself or somebody you see on the news, a billionaire you see on the news, or the CEO of a big company you see on a big building comes and speaks to a student that you know. When I share it to the other people who have clubs in Houston, or just a student generally, I think it's touching. I think it's also the reason for the interviews is to get people interested in a variety of things. So we've interviewed from monks and philosophers and sort of philosopher economists and business people. I think it's just to get a wide variety of different people, and you can take bits and pieces from each person and sort of use them to become the person you're gonna eventually become in the future as a student.
But I'd want either to have conversations where progress was made on topics together, that you and I would talk about something and figure something out together, or at least that you could better help the world understand me, say, by better summarizing what I am. That is, if other people do other interviews just like this one and they're no better,
Mhm.
then I lament what was the point
Mhm.
of having so many interviews? Why not just have 5 interviews and everybody watches those rather than 50, right?
Mhm.
I think if you're going to have more than 5 interviews with somebody, it should be some way in which number 6 through 50 are adding something. They should be adding something to the collection of all the interviews by somehow getting at some angle that other people didn't, getting, exploring some issue that other people didn't, somehow getting something better into view. That would be the point. I think that's what I would hope you'd aspire to, is somehow making each interview pay for itself somehow and making progress on something, not just being another copy of other interviews.
So when we started out, it was called Text and Talk or something like that, and it was with my investment analysis blog that I have, and we have writers at a couple of schools and whatnot, and we just wanted to interview like financial advisors, things like that. But as we grew and as we got more people, they would refer us to others. And originally, when it was just business people, I could interview even big name business people. Like we went to Ted Cruz's house and we interviewed his wife, and obviously Ted Cruz has a million interviews, but his wife didn't have so many, or Heidi Cruz, and we would interview other like managing directors at Goldman Sachs or big CEOs, and those people would have very limited amount of interviews. So anything you ask them is new information being put out in the world. But with academics like Scott Aronson that you know, or we've interviewed tons of famous professors from different universities and whatnot. It's a lot harder to navigate how to make an interview exactly what you said. And sometimes I question myself, what's the point of this other than I feel like I'm wasting somebody's time if I'm just speaking to them for not
You're
really.
just asking the same questions other people have and getting the same answers. It seems a waste of time. So the question is, can you ask different questions? Can you have a different path to the conversation where something interesting is found there?
Mhm. Yeah, for sure. I don't know exactly how to navigate that, but that's definitely the goal that I'd be striving for.
Right. One way to think is just to have a topic that you're only asking about, nobody else is asking about, and then you can be sure that your interviews are unique. It's not the only way, but it would at least be one way.
Do you think it would be interesting
Or you could
to
just argue with them as a pick something they claim and try to argue with them with it. That would another big way to make progress is that you actually, engage their ideas in some way and try to push back and see if you can find a critique that makes them rephrase or something, right? Much of intellectual conversation is people arguing with each other about things, right? And so you could do that. Again, I'm not telling you what to do, but I'm just telling you in general. I hope that I want conversations to be productive. I want the world to be better because a conversation happened afterward than before. And I don't want that just to be a connection. So I think there's just a habit in the world of people wanting to talk to someone as an excuse just to make an association with them, just so you could use them as a reference or use them as a contact or things like that. I think that's kind of a shame. But for example, like I love this anecdote of this book I think called Power. Basically, there's a high level executive in some company,
Mhm.
and people come to him all the time asking him for advice. And then, um, sorry, did I have the video off all this time?
Yeah, the video's off.
I'm sorry, I didn't notice that. It was okay. Sorry. Hello. Video's been off all this time. Jeez.
Mhm.
Anyway, he announces retirement, and all of a sudden, nobody wants to have meetings with him anymore. Right? He knows just as much about the whole organization, but the point is, people were mainly going to him asking for advice, but they really just wanted the connection and the him helping them on something and him recommending them, etc. They didn't really want his advice. And that was revealed by the fact that as soon as he was about to retire and couldn't do all these other things for them, they didn't want to talk to him anymore.
Mhm.
That's sad, right? There's this pretense of talking about things, but it's actually just for the hidden motive of wanting somebody's social support.
Mhm.
Anyway, I got to go here.
Okay. All right, thank you so much.